Hi everyone and welcome to Prodigal 36. And with Spider-Man No Way Home out in HD for everyone to watch at home, no pun intended, I just got the chance to recently rewatch it and I saw so many Easter eggs and details that are in the film that everyone has missed, which I'll be listing off in this video. So I won't be talking about things people already know, like Tobey making the same pose as 90s Spider-Man when landing, or the Amazing Spider-Man issue 3 reference during the bridge fight with Doc Ock. But before we get started, if at any point you enjoyed this video, I really appreciate if you could drop a like, as that would really help out the channel. Thank you. So let's see what we have. When Damage Control comes in to invade the Parker home, we see the Edith glasses on top of Peter's PS2 games, showing his financial situation. Another thing that I love that the MCU Spider films have done is constantly show Peter wearing the same clothes in each film. So even though they don't constantly say that he's broke, they do definitely show it for sure. There was also one moment after Matt Murdock caught the brick where we see his hand kind of flinch a bit, showing that even though he was successful at catching it, it did still hurt his hand. When May and Peter move into Happy's apartment, like Homecoming, they also show Peter's strength by carrying multiple bags, while Happy was struggling to carry a few, obviously showing how strong Peter is. And the nod to when Peter was casually carrying the suitcase that contained the Stark suit in Homecoming, while Happy was struggling to get out of the car. We also see Happy's helmet and boxing gloves from Iron Man 2. Shout out to Amazing Spider Sack on Twitter for catching that. Speak of Iron Man 2, there's also a blueprint of the art reactor, which I believe Ivan Vanko uses in the beginning of the film. Shout out to @Iron Family from Twitter for pointing that one out as well as the Iron Man poster we see from that same film, which Tony hangs up, and Morgan Stark's drawing when Peter is trying to get rid of the green painting on his Spider-Man suit. When Peter is listing up the things he likes about MJ during the phone call, he mentions that he likes that she likes sports, and MJ talks about how she thinks the Mets are gonna go all the way this year, which is also Peter's favorite baseball team from both in the comics and in the MCU. When Peter, MJ and Ned are going back to school, one of the protesters is holding an image of Spider-Man's mask, but instead of the lenses being mostly white, they're colored black instead, kind of similar to the Alex Ross suit, which was the concept art for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in the first film, possibly foreshadowing Tobey's appearance in the upcoming film, as well as his first villain, the Green Goblin, but also could be a nod to Assassin Spider-Man, which is a Spider-Man from a different universe that's been trained by Wolverine and is willing to kill. And Pin Particle as well as Ant-Man can also be shown on the wall inside Midtown High when Peter's walking to class. The trooper Mr. Harrington also organized for Peter also have a few Easter eggs, like the photo of Peter is the exact same one used in the leaked footage Mysterio made to frame Peter and expose his secret identity. And at one point we also do see the names of Spider-Man comic writers like Tom DeFalco, Kurt Busiek and Peter David. Also, not only do we see a graffiti of Spidey's co-creator's name, Steve Ditko, which also shows up quite a bit in the film, but also Gil Kane's name as well, on Midtown's High's rooftop where Peter and MJ were chilling, who was one of the many artists for the Amazing Spider-Man comic series. There was also one point in that scene where Peter talks about how there's crime in Boston, which is almost the exact same way on how Andrew was talking about how there's crime in England in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, foreshadowing Andrew's appearance in that film. During the sequence when Peter is getting the letter from the college, we see the Lego Death Star getting more complete in each sequence, also showing the passage of time. The Lego Death Star being destroyed in both Homecoming and No Way Home is a nod to the original Star Wars trilogy, where both Death Stars gets blown up in A New Hope and Return of the Jedi respectively, both Death Stars getting destroyed in the first and third film. When Peter is walking towards the Sanctum Sanctorum, we could also see a graffiti of Romita, a nod to both John Romita Sr. and his son John Romita Jr., who are both artists for the main Amazing Spider-Man series. And John Romita Jr. is currently back as the artist for Spidey, which is awesome to hear. When Peter is making changes during Stranger's spell, Peter mentions Happy's full name, which is also the same in the comics, excluding his middle name of course, that being Joseph, and I believe it is actually his first time his first name does get mentioned in the MCU too. And when the multiverse breaks open, we also do see a glimpse of the Lizard's figure, showing him getting dragged into the MCU. And when Peter's meeting with the administration of MIT, we also do see Edith being offline, showing that almost all of his technology from Stark is being cut by Damage Control and the authorities, and of course that they confiscated the glasses. When we meet Doctor Strange again in the film, we see him being injured from his fight with the Lizard, and I believe those cuts also remain when we see him in the final battle. When Peter is fighting Electro and is destroying the grid in order to depower him, he does it almost the exact same way as Andrew is trying to overload Electro in the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Electro mentioning that he hates woods is obviously a joke towards the fact that wood is a poor conductor of electricity. When Otto has already been cured, he mentions how the voices in his head are gone, which is obviously a reference to his line in Spider-Man 2, where after the inhibitor chip was destroyed, he mentions how there's voices in his head, as if someone's talking. When the Stark Fabricator is on the process of creating the cures for all of the villains, Normans and Lizards are on the process cures, which is why the cure initially didn't work when Aunt May used it on him to save Peter. Shout out to the Canadian lad for pointing that one out. And not to mention, next to Norman's cure you can also see the lizard's DNA next to it, to show how even his DNA is necessary to make the cure for Dr. Connors. While Aunt May is dying, Peter says it's just me and you, just like she said to him in Homecoming, and even says it several times before he leaves. When Tobey's Peter Parker asks MJ and Ned where Tom's Peter would go to get away from everything and just to think, he mentions how for him it's on top of the Chrysler building, which we actually see him do in Spider-Man 1 after Uncle Ben dies and caught up to the mugger he initially thought killed him, which is actually an awesome detail and I really appreciate it. When Thomas Peter is talking about the other villains' cures to his Spider-Man brothers, he mentions every single villain except for Norman, showing how much hatred he still has for him. And another detail I appreciate that they kept in is the fact that both Tobey and Andrew have the same web sound effects from their films. Take a listen.
Whoa! Come on, let me go! Stop it!
Just wait your turn, Doc! I'll be right back.
When the Spider-Men are landing in the iconic poses, they land in the order the actor portrayed the character. So Tobey landed first because he's the original Spider-Man, Andrew was the second to land because he was the second Spider-Man after Tobey, and of course Tom Holland being the third Spider-Man, he landed last though in the middle. Though it wasn't the only time they showed that, as when all three Peter Parkers are sensing the pumpkin bomb in the box, they also showed the actor in the order they portrayed the character to. First Tobey, then Andrew, then Tom. When Electro is electrocuting Andrew's Peter Parker and is holding him up, he's doing it almost the exact same way as he did in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And while he's electrocuting him, we can also see Andrew's lenses starting to crack, which is a really awesome detail. And shout out to Drifty Film for pointing that one out. And when Norman comes into the final battle, we see him use the razor bats against the heroes. And while he's doing so, we see Tom Holland's Peter Parker dodge the razor bats almost the exact same way as Tobey Maguire did in the first film, which is also a pretty neat detail. When Andrew's Peter goes to save MJ, he of course dives in, but before he gets to her, he moves an object out of the way to catch her, which obviously shows how much he learned from that traumatic night when Gwen died, as there were multiple objects between them two when Andrew was trying to save her, clearly showing that he played that scenario over and over again on how he could have saved her, which is a really powerful detail. There was also one moment I believe some people said was cut out in the film, though I saw in my theatre, which is the moment where Tobey saves Dr. Connors, as he was still outside after he was cured. After the Green Goblin stabbed Tobey, he mentioned how he's been stabbed before, which is obviously a reference to when Harry stabbed him in Spider-Man 3. During the credits we see a lot of Doctor Strange imagery, which is obviously a reference to Steve Ditko's art, also the co-creator of the character too. Aunt May's speech is also seen in the credits when Marissa Tomei's name shows up, as well as the Feast logo and the tie on the shirt, which is a nod to Homecoming, when she helped Peter learn how to put on the tie. There's also one point where we can see Tobey's 2002 Spider logo shown in the credits, and the credits also show an Iron Man helmet, Captain America's shield, shield logo, and Doctor Strange's shield. Peter's list of plans of what to do during Far From Home, but MJ can also be seen in the credits, as well as the Statue of Liberty with the Captain America shield as well afterwards. When Tom Holland's name shows up, not only is it implied that he based his brand new Spider logo on Tobey and Andrew's, but also in the corner we also see Steve Ditko's Spider logo from the first Amazing Spider-Man comic run by him and Stan Lee. Peter's speech to MJ he was going to say to her in the coffee shop scene can also be seen in the credits, as well as a drawing from Peter from Homecoming, which can also be caught earlier in the film in her room. And when Benedict Cumberbatch's name shows up as well, we can also see Doctor Strange's runes too, which obviously looks a lot like the runes that was used to wipe out everyone's knowledge that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. The Lego Palpatine minifigure also shows up in the credits, when Ned's actor Jacob Batalon also appears, which as we saw made brief appearances in both Homecoming and of course the ending of No Way Home. The art of the Spider-Man making the exact same poses in the credits is actually from the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, where Peter goes to fight the Green Goblin for the first time. And lastly, the song chosen for the credits, The Magic Number by De La Soul, mentioning how 3 is the magic number, is a perfect fit for No Way Home, as you may have guessed, because it's the third movie about the third live action version of Spider-Man, which contains 3 Peter Parkers too, as well as magic being a massive part of the film thanks to Doctor Strange, and the reason why the multiverse opened up too. So there we have it, a lot of Easter eggs and details pretty much everyone if not most people missed in Spider-Man No Way Home. And given how huge the film is, do you think there's anything I've missed in this video? And if so, please drop them in the comments below, I would really love to know. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. If you enjoyed this video, please like, and one more subscribe. To begin, Protocol 36.